My good name is Brian Sakwa, and I'm so excited to be right here for you. It's been a minute, off the air kidogo, but you know what? We are back, and I guess you missed me, and I missed you too. Karibu sana. And you can engage with me and keep me company on our socials as well. Like I've said, is at Y254 channel. How was your weekend? How's it been? And how's the month taking you? It's just about 2 or 3 days? And we say goodbye to the 7th month of 2025, and then we head to August. August is always a busy month. I believe it's always from one holiday to another, one event that leads to another. And no sooner had you blinked your eyes, it's already 2026, man. I can't wait. I'm so excited. How has the year been for you now that we are literally almost done with almost the first half? Actually, the first half is done. We are just setting into almost the heart of the second half of the year. And that's what we are all about, okay? Continue to interact with us and let us know where you're watching us from. We love it each and every time you tell us how you're feeling, how you're doing. We feel it and we see it, and that's why we're here. Now, you can also find me at Sakwa 101, and in just a bit, I'm going to be telling you what's hot, what's trending, and what's not. Now, I have copies of the Daily Nation, the People Daily, as well as the Standard. Let's get to see what are some of the top trending stories on them. On the splash of the Daily Nation, it says, exposed police killings cover up. Right, then down there as well, there's missing activist who was tortured by his captors has been found. And then there's a question there, silencing critics. Human rights activist Mwabili Mwagodi, who had been missing for days, was dumped in Kwale at the Kenya-Tanzania border on Sunday morning. Okay. And then on top of the splash of the Daily Nation, it talks about 2 police officers to be sentenced today for murdering a detainee. And below the explanation says, court proceedings on police killings during the recent protests are exposing attempts to conceal incriminating evidence in a pattern that has played out in past trials. A judge once rebuked the blue code of silence, referring to a conspiracy within the police service to shield rogue colleagues. The story is on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Nation. And then there as well, there's a conversation about, there's a highlight rather, about the labor. Big win for former NHIF staff as court settles pay dispute. Workers who are either absorbed into the Social Health Authority or redeployed elsewhere in the public service will retain their last drawn salary. So there's a bit of reprieve right there for former NHIF workers. And then down there it talks about police goons clash with opposition leaders, and it explains police officers in Muranga yesterday combined their efforts with goons to disperse opposition politicians, the politicians who are pushing to stop President William Ruto's re-election in the 2027 general election, had attended a Sunday service at the AIPCA Kahoro Church in Kigumo constituency and were on their way out when all hell broke loose. The story is on page 7, and I remember actually checking an update of that. There was a bit of a standoff and an exchange between I believe John Matthew, and then there's one of the guys who's also an advocate of the High Court or a litigator, and there was a tear gas. There was also tear gas being, held in the air. But again, on top of the Daily Nation, there's a photo of the president right there, and it talks about President Ruto allies plot Mount Kenya comeback. The game plan is President loyalists had meetings at the hotels in 3 counties on Saturday to refine a strategy to counter former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagwa's influence in the region. The story is on page 7. But then down there, they are talking about an interesting strategy of how the president is set to seize the Mount Kenya region. And the first one, the strategy according to the Daily Nation, quote-unquote, courtesy, it says, seize engaging Gachagua on political rhetoric. And then the second strategy is launch ward-level conversations with voters. And then the third one is withdraw oppressive border and coffee pay policies. Wow, that could injure someone. And then the fourth one is give financial support to needy residents. And then hype Ruto service delivery. Okay, work towards getting 60% of Mount Kenya. And then poach leaders from opposition, and then keep rivals, families from political wars. and then how president visit the region, and then stop hurling insults at rivals. So that's a good strategy to say if that's a credible strategy to go by. Then we are bound to see what's going to happen if we told that's the strategy that they're going to use to ensure that they seize Murima. Okay, now on the splash of the People Daily, it talks about President Ruto's failed free education pledge. And then down there it talks about while campaigning for the presidency, he made a high-sounding pledges to Kenyans that he will revitalize the learning sector. And now he's presiding over spectacular collapse. But I remember yesterday the president reiterating and saying that, you know, the move or the directive and even the implementation of having free primary and secondary education is still in place. So definitely you're going to see it work. But yeah, there's a bit of issue about capitation. What's going to happen next because there's some money that was deducted in terms of the budgeting for the education sector, and it's an ongoing conversation, and you know there's a lot of brouhaha and hula baloo around that. We'll definitely keep you updated. And then there's a highlight about physically challenged activist efforts to defend ODM and Rift Valley finally pay off. The story is on page 3 of the People Daily newspaper. And then how social stereotypes stalling women-led export trade in Africa, page 15 of that. And then down there on the Daily Nation, there's I think it was a captured moment during the Sabasaba protest when the state fears the people. Kenya's peaceful protest dream fades. You know, there's just part of that and much more. But again, let me see what the Standard has. The Standard has detailed 4-day ordeal. The men who abducted activist Mwabili Mwagodi in Tanzania wanted to know why he was causing trouble in Kenya. They blindfolded, handcuffed, and drove him to a scene for torture. They stomped on his head and jabbed him with syringes. After the abuse, they dumped him across the border into the hands of another ruthless crew at the Kenyan side. Meanwhile, a Kenyan scholar in the United States has petitioned the United Nations to stop President William Ruto from addressing the General Assembly in September, citing his worsening human rights record. The story is on page 4 of the Standard newspaper. And I think, quote unquote, an excerpt insert right there. It talks about, I want to tell our President Ruto that at the height of the 2022 general election, Mwabili went around Sagala in Voi on a motorbike campaigning for you. Spare his life. That is Jocelina Mwabili. That is the mother to the previously abducted activist Mwabili Mwagodi, who was found alive but injured, tortured. And as this, uproar continues. By the way, Mwabili is also the brother to Isabella Kituri. She is a journalist at BBC Swahili. Now, away from that, let's get to the Capital newspaper, the Capital website as well. It has captured interesting highlights. PCA elders cleared a forcible detainer conviction in land dispute. And then down there it talks about appeal court rejects bid by directors to hide behind corporate veil in debt recovery case. And then education reforms on track as government expands access and quality. That's according to sound off by Deputy President Kithure Kindiki. And then talks about down there, Afghan refugees face mounting pressure as deportations intensify amid aid cuts and Taliban crackdown. And then India-Maldives ties remain strong, says Prime Minister Narendra Modi during the 60th independence anniversary celebration. Right, let's get into it. And now Kenya's Gen Zs pitch big ideas after Salasi's 1 million Kenya shilling tweet, but frustration over jobs remains. And then Mudavadi defends school capitation digitization to curb graft and enhance efficiency. And then UDA pledges to transparent nomination for Mbeere North by election amid political jostling. And last but not least, DP Kindiki hails Raila's statesmanship, urges unity for the national development. And lastly, border operators say proposed law will render them jobless, especially when it comes to them being contained not to use not to run or do the operations or conduct the operations in the CBD. Let's get to the story about appeal court rejecting bid by directors to hide corporate veil in debt recovery. Now, the Court of Appeal has declined to grant a stay of execution sought by real estate firm Shady Acres Limited and its directors, including David Muriuki, Mambo and Ross Mambo, against a High Court decision that lifted the company's corporate veil, allowing creditors to pursue a director's personally for a debt. In a ruling delivered by Justices Patrick Kiage, Jamila Mohammed and Weldon Corey, the appellate court dismissed the application as unmerited, finding that applicants had failed to demonstrate that they had, arguable appeal. The applicant, quote unquote, from the ruling, the applicant has not demonstrated that it has an arguable appeal. The three judgments stated on Friday, adding that the High Court orders had already taken effect and execution was underway. The case stems from a long-term running dispute between Shady Acres Limited and Silver Construction Company, which provided construction services for a real estate project cited AL-Air number 209/20735. A consent judgment entered in December 2020 required Shady Acres to use proceeds from the sale of apartments to settle the debt owed by Silver Construction. That's just another story up there. Now back to matters education. We have Professor Kithure Kindiki, who is the Deputy President as well, sounding off. And this has actually caused uproar or raised concern by different stakeholders, including parents, teachers, or what should be done regarding matters education. Now, as it's loading, let's get to it. Education reforms on track as government expands access and quality. Sounding off his Deputy President Kithure Kindiki, he asserted that the government will not relent and aid sweeping reforms to deliver accessible and relevant quality education for all learners, stating that Kenya has come too far to reverse the gains achieved over the past 2 decades. In a statement, the Deputy President outlined milestones achieved in just 2 years, saying they have cemented the foundation for a transformed education system that meets the needs of the 21st century learner. He also noted that the government's most significant achievements in addressing the long-standing challenges in the competency-based curriculum, that is the CBC, has evolved into a broader framework under the Competency-Based Education and Training CBET. For that matter, the conceptualization of the CBC has now been brought into the CBET with a seamless transition to senior school, and is also expected in January of 2026. DP Kindiki outlined the infrastructure rollout with 23,000 new classrooms constructed, 16,000 by the Ministry of Education and 7,000 through the National Government Constituencies Development Fund, call it the NGCDF. He also added that construction of 1,600 science laboratories is set to begin targeting underserved areas and schools offering science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. That's STEM. By the way, STEM, if you click on your TikTok right now, especially, I believe the last icon just on top of it, on its outlay, there's a STEM icon there. And if you click on it, you're likely to see engineering updates, videos, people just doing calculations, simulations, physics experiments, empirical examples as well. So I guess that's a good one in terms of being educative, like TikTok not just being a platform, a short-form platform where you post videos, but it's also a platform where you're able to learn something. TikTok at first it was like, right here, it actually went ablaze when Asia went viral and she started making money and she received endorsements. You remember at the time of Utawezana? I remember that. Not long far ago. 2020 Apple, right? If I'm not wrong. STEM. science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Now, the Deputy President also emphasized the commitment by the Kenya Kwanza regime in improving the quality of education through hiring of additional teachers from the annual average of 5,000 new teachers before in 2022. He also added that a further 2,400 teachers will be hired in December, raising the total number of recruitment in 3 years to 100,000, right? And that's a good number. That's a good that's progress, because in as much as there's some of these festering issues when it comes to payment, now the issue is capitation. But I believe more teachers were hired, because I remember, the president is well reiterating at some point. He even tried to allude that, as compared to other previous leadership systems, he's the one who has at least tried to give a facelift to the education sector. And now still the transition, still you're wallowing from the stability, finding a stable ground with the competency-based curriculum, right? But then it says 76,000 primary and secondary school teachers have been employed to actualize the constitutional right to basic education, he said. This is almost a third of all teachers employed between 1963 and 2022. Wow, that's impressive for real to say, 73,000. He also outlined a far-reaching government agenda aimed at transforming higher education in Kenya, saying deliberate investments in universities and technical institutions are reshaping access, affordability, and relevance across the sector. I remember last week I was in a forum that had, I think, Mariam, Eric Latif, and Janet Mbugua, and we were discussing why there's unrest in learning institutions. And I remember just trying to say probably it's because, for me, in my mindset, in my own sentiments, I was like, what's happening outside here, including the picketing and the demonstrations, is actually a reflection of also what's happening in schools. Because for a very long time, from one generation to another, previously it was come to class, come to school, study this and do this and do this, and if you don't do this, then we're going to kick you out or you're a failure. But now learners are becoming more, I'd say, relational, in a sense that they want to be engaged in leadership. And I even remember interviewing one of the youth leaders right here who said leadership is supposed to be people-based. It should be more collaborative, in a sense that with these learners, to curb this unrest is listen to them, give them a platform. How do you want to be led? How do you want to be taught? What are you uncomfortable with? Hear from them, let them voice out their issues. And I believe from there, because for very, 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 very long time, if you live a life where you're being muzzled, you can't do this because if you do this, you'll be kicked out or you'll be fired, you'll be shot somewhere, it makes people feel enraged. And that's literally what's happening in some of these learning institutions, because of late you're seeing, schools being set ablaze. Others are going on strike for as simple as, there was no sugar in this porridge, or there was no salt, or these beans, tasted sour, or it was never oiled, they never put oil, or they put too much paraffin, I don't know if they still do those things in high school. Do they still put paraffin in githeri? So that, I don't know. Mbona unaweka mafuta ya gari kwa githeri? Why? If somebody wants to do something, they'll definitely just do it. But like I said, back to the point is, these learners hawataki kuwa, for lack of a slower term or a warmer term, they don't like authoritarianism, in a sense that, yes, I'm the deputy principal, and if you don't do this, if you don't get an A minor, you're a failure and you should go out. It should be more like conversational, in that you get down your high horse as a leader and start listening and conversing with the people. And that way it's more of collaborative, other than I'm a leader and I say this and if you don't do this, you're out. So that resentment is what, for me, in my response to why there's unrest in some of the schools, is that leadership should be more, collaborative, other than, you're on the platform and you're issuing directives. And that's just what has been happening outside here. So for me, in my understanding, I felt like it's a reflection of what has been going on outside here. And also you need to understand, learners are just like adults out here. You picket and demonstrate when you feel like your rights are being, muzzled on being, constricted. So the best thing for your voices to be heard is You picket. You even picket and demonstrate individually in your own life. You know, there's friends that you don't want to talk to, or if you don't want to hear from them, you picket by blocking them or by muting them. That's another way actually of having your point heard, or you don't even say anything. You just go MIA, or you log out of that, app. So I believe some of these things, they can't make sense to just an ordinary person who can't, let's say, dissect it in such an angle, but I believe it's the same thing. Anyways, moving on swiftly. Lastly, on this report under education, the Deputy President Kindiki outlined a far-reaching government agenda aimed at transforming higher education in Kenya, saying deliberate investments in universities and technical institutions are reshaping access and affordability. The increase in enrollment in technical and vocational education and training TVET institution, which he said has doubled over the past years from 297,000 students in 2022 to 700,000 in 2025, has signaled transformation. Lastly, it talks about under the dual training policy, all TVET learners are now required to undergo practical industry training before graduation. The hands-on approach is espoused to ensure that graduates leave institutions with not just theoretical knowledge, but real workplace experience that enhances employability. That's a valid point, because I remember interviewing, was he somebody from the Federation of Kenya Employer? Maybe it was something that had to do with entrepreneurship, but in the career space, where if you visit a Federation of Kenya Employers, that talks about, there's a huge chunk, it estimated it to be 67 or 69 of youth, or let's just say graduates, who leave universities or they're churned out annually. I can only imagine this year the number of graduates that are going to be churned out at the University of Nairobi, at Multimedia, at USIU, at Daystar, at Kenyatta University, name them. All of those graduates are heading to the job market, but then some of them actually head there without the practical needed skills. So it pointed out there's an issue of the skill gap from graduates to those who've even dropped out of school. They're both eyeing the same job opportunities. So in bid to actually do that, TVETs are there to enhance that. And I believe you can graduate from uni, study what you studied for. To shock you is you could have studied journalism, broadcast journalism. So the theoretical work, and depending on your institution where you studied at, it's totally different when it comes to practicing in the industry, something that they don't tell you there, right? But that's a school anyways. It's just supposed to equip you at least with the skill and the technique of how to navigate through the sector, precisely employment sector. So there's a gap, there's a disconnect between you've graduated, you have your degree, and now you have to go to the job market, but then this job demands that you must have soft skills that are relevant to the job or the job description, and also hard skills, which is a thing in the modern day world. And that's that for that story. Now, as we move on swiftly as well, there's a story about Kenyan Gen Zs preaching big ideas after Salasia, that is Mumias East Member of Parliament Peter Salasia, promised a 1 million prize. All right, now President William Ruto came to, okay, I don't want to get to that one, it sounds explosive. All right, when Mumias East Member of Parliament Peter Salasia posted a simple call for business ideas on X, offering to co-invest 1 million Kenya shillings in any venture with a short payback period excluding Airbnbs and betting, he likely didn't anticipate triggering flood of pitches ranging from serious to outright absurd. And this is what the tweet said, quote unquote, "I'm looking for someone who have business ideas that its payback period in short is, apart from Airbnbs, betting, that with 1 million Kenya shillings we can invest in. We shall share 70%, me and him or her, and 30%. And then 20 kazi." And then, quote unquote, he finished there by saying, "We'll be reading the comments." So that one tweet turned his feed into a fast-paced, crowdsourced Shark Tank, the Kenyan style, complete with business plans, satire, and hustle energy. All right, so there were some of the responses from that one. Let me see if I can get yes. So there's somebody who said, business proposals just might work. Another one said, invest in a camper van for road trips and staycations with 1 million Kenya shillings. You build or buy one and start earning right away. But alikuwa amesema hataki stories ya Airbnbs, I can see. Another one said, niko na machines za 1M, wewe ulete 1M tuanze kuunda frames na milango. That one sounds lucrative because this other person has a milli. So, and Salasya is offering a milli. Nice. A milli is a million. Okay. All right. Another one said, start a digital agency, high demand, low overhead, payback in under a year. Some of the responses are actually innovative and entrepreneurial and enthusiastic. I can see somebody said, we can set up a medical center for 500K, returns is 20K per day. How will that work? They're offering to give you 1 million. This is a good deal actually, but then the returns should be 70% under a year. Can you think of a business right now, if you're given 1 million, you'll be able to return 1 million by the end of the year? Like starting this August, because August is just by Thursday, we'll be in August, right? 1 million, think of it. Given 1 million right now, what business will you start in that return on investments by December, let's say 31st, so to say, you'll be already having another million. And that could be, if you're to break it down per day, maybe you're creating revenue of 20K to 50K. Because if you are to do calculations, if you want to have 1 million by December, at least it should be a business that gives you, let's say, I believe 15 to 20K, or let's just give it maybe 25 to 50,000 there. But I believe 25 to 50,000 there multiplied by the remaining 6 months, right? 6 months or 7 or 5. But then also you have to keep in mind that for you to get that 1 million, you have to be, let's say, getting weekly returns. Yeah. So maybe weekly returns of 15 to 20K, right? Approximately, roughly. Or think about it and let me know. Right. I love it. I think I love that one. So Salas's tweet may have generated laughs, but the depth of engagement it receives reflects a more serious national crisis, the struggle for economic survival among Kenyan youth. All right. A year later, on June 25th, youth again took to the streets to commemorate those lost, and over 60 more were killed. While President Ruto often points his affordable housing program and bilateral job deals abroad as proof of job creation, many youth dismiss these efforts as either unsustainable or inaccessible. The jobs abroad, mainly in healthcare and tech, are too few to address the scale of unemployment. Now, this is just according to a report by the World Bank. It says, according to the World Bank, projections of the Kenya's overall unemployment rate stood at 5.7% in 2024, while the KNBS reported 4.9% in quarter 4 of 2022. However, youth unemployment paints a grimmer picture. The Federation of Kenya Employers, FKE, once again is popping up. Right, 67% have just pointed out that a while ago. It estimates at 67% of Kenyans aged between 15 to 34 are unemployed. Now, this is why Salas's thread became a microcosm of a national mood. Raw creativity meeting real desperation. And I can see right here, according to the Capital News, they've literally tried to capture every reaction to that. And I think it's interesting. Yeah, that's a good reflection. I think we should have more leaders doing this in terms of collaborating. Because if you, the last time you checked, who was the last politician who tried to bid his money against, the subjects or citizens or locals? Yeah, aseme tu, hey, leo niko na 100,000, nataka mtu mwenye anauza smoky. Kama smoky business yako ina boom na uko sure unaweza niletea 100,000 by end of the year, I'm going to give you this 100K and you can use it to scale your smoky business, right? So that's a good move. Shout out to Salasya. Shout out to Salasya, man. You should pass by if you're watching, or just in case you will, or somebody whispers to you. Now, moving on swiftly away from that, Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi defends school capitation digitization to curb graft and enhance efficiency. Still on matters education, Prime Cabinet Secretary defended the government's decision to digitize the school capitation disbursement process, terming it as a critical reform aimed at improving transparency, accountability, and efficiency in education. Speaking during a public engagement, Mwabili said the transition from manual to digital systems will enable tighter monitoring of how public funds are allocated and utilized in schools nationwide. Quote unquote, down there, he says, we have received disturbing reports suggesting that capitation funds have been misappropriated, with some estimates indicating losses of up to 2 billion Kenya shillings. This must stop. Every education official must be accountable. We are putting in place systems to track every coin disbursed right down to the school level. What is stunning is that money that's supposed to be spent to improve infrastructure, even in meals. I remember there's somebody who said who had a project called Dishina County. Was Dishina County for schools all over the 47 counties, or it was specifically in Nairobi? Shout out to that initiative, because I believe in some kind of sort of way it was helping these learners in these institutions, because the last time you checked, from Maziwa ya Nyayo, have we had anything in between? Like somebody was trying to say, the other one had Maziwa Nyayo, this other one has free education, this other one, the memes of something being that was a meme, by the way, one leg. Yeah, but it's funny. Kenyans have a way of trying to twist and turn, serious moments into hilarious, comedy and laughter. And that's just, the pleasure of being a Kenyan anyways. Now, it talks about the digitization process being spearheaded by the Ministry of Education in collaboration with the Ministry of ICT, will leverage platforms such as the eCitizen portal to streamline capitation process and plug existing loopholes. Mwabili revealed that the government is preparing at least 600 billion Kenya shillings budget for the education sector and is keen to ensure funds are traceable and also used for their intended purpose. Yes, I mean, each and every time we have money disbursed, especially from the NGCDF, yes, National Government, too. Finish it for me. Okay. He also acknowledged the growing financial hardship among students in tertiary institutions, and also assured that the government is working to ensure all deserving learners receive adequate support, not just for tuition, but also for basic needs like meals and accommodation. If you look at the rate at which university students are Nainama, but there's an article I was reading, and it was saying that it was on the People Daily, that somebody was trying to capture dieting in higher learning institutions, and it said most university students go without the most needed nutrition in terms of eating a balanced diet, and it was alluding to lack of finances, especially to university students, who most of them either depend on Higher Education Loans Board, or those that depend literally directly from their parents' sustainability, and it makes it difficult for them to have a balanced diet. And then number two, because I remember in the article as well, it pointed out a study that was done in a South African university. But then back right here, it talked about meals being extremely expensive. Like if you want to eat a balanced diet in campus or any higher learning institution, then it means you have to have some good amount of money for you to eat. Like if you're eating chapati ndengu, then from there after you can have a fruit salad, and then thereafter maybe you can have something else, to just balance off your diet. So it means per day you could be spending 200 bob on a balanced, diet, which most students can't afford to have 200 bob rather per day for a meal. So they'd rather like eat breakfast and wainame, or skip lunch, and then they'll eat dinner or supper, however you want to call it. And that makes them to miss important nutrients in terms of them just being, But somebody will say, ule kuja kusoma au kuja kudishi. But I believe meals and academia na kusoma zinaendana hivi. if you want to actually be, so they tell you eat a balanced diet so that you have bright eyes. Usilale pia una balance pia aukule githeri mob, and then unaongeza na avocado, and then thereafter unaongeza waru or beans. That combo is acidic, yeah? So you'll be passing out gas all the time. All right, now let's get to the story about Mwabili. It talks about Tanzania aids Kenya in ruthless crackdown on President Ruto critics. Okay. All right, it's highlighting the story of that. That's the question gripping East Africa after Kenyan activist Mwabili Mwagodi was found abandoned and shaken in a thicket in Kwale County on Sunday, just days after he vanished mysteriously in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. Mwagodi, a fierce critic of President William Ruto's church fundraising drive and a leader in the Occupy Church movement, had disappeared in Tanzania on July 23rd. His last known act was a social media post tagging top Kenyan security chiefs and the president, accusing them of corruption and repression. Days later, he surfaced shaken, having walked 4 kilometers to safety after being dumped near Diani. Civil society groups and political observers are now questioning whether Kenya and Tanzania are engaged in silent collusion, an unspoken pact to deal with political dissenters outside the law. The signs are disturbing, according to this update here. It says, just months ago, Kenyan activist Boniface Mwangi and Ugandan lawyer Agatha Tuhaire were arrested, tortured, and deported from Tanzania under murky circumstances. Earlier, People's Liberation Party leader Martha Karua and former Chief Justice William Mutunga were barred from entering Tanzania, and while others like Vocal Africa founder Khalid Hussein was deported, further fueling suspicions of a silent diplomatic consensus to suppress criticism across borders. In all cases, Kenya offered little or more than silence. So critics say Tanzania may be acting as Kenya's enforcer during what Nairobi occasionally does, albeit illegal, abduct activists. And in May 2025, President William Ruto issued a public apology to Tanzania. And I remember that saying, quote unquote, if we have wronged you, forgive us. So human groups now say that statement raised more red flags than it settled, especially given the absence of any protest over the treatment of Kenyan citizens abroad. And lastly, meanwhile, Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu warned foreign activists to stay out of her country, branding them chaotic creators or chaos creators. For the message is clear: dissent will not be tolerated, whether at home or from across the border. And that's just that about that article. What do you believe? Do you see it as a move to a consensus to muzzle dissent across the communities? Let us know. Right now, Deputy President, lastly, before we get to unserious stuff that can make us think kidogo and just chillax, Deputy President Kithure Kindiki has called on leaders across the political divide to rise above personal interest and embrace the spirit of nationhood, citing former Prime Minister Raila Odinga as a model of statesmanship. Speaking on Saturday during an economic empowerment event at Onger Grounds in Nyatike constituency, Kindiki praised Raila Odinga for choosing to work with the Kenya Kwanza administration under a broad-based governance arrangement led by President William Ruto. And I remember yesterday, former Deputy President sounding off, saying, you know what, it's going to leave you in premium tears, but you know what, we'll keep following it up and giving you updates on this. Now, this update actually caught my attention. So President Donald Trump wants Beyonce, Oprah Winfrey, and any other, including Kamala Harris, to be jailed and prosecuted for campaigning. Because what usually happens, for example, because I remember having this conversation with Stephanie before she got poached. But anyway, Steph will be back soon. I'm just trying to make you have a heart attack. Mbona mtaki mtu akuwe poached? Anyways, I'm speaking to myself. So yeah. So what usually happens is, if there's a prominent celebrity or musician who has influence and is able to garner numbers in terms of encouraging voters to go and vote for this particular candidate during campaigns or during elections, what they usually do is they are given some financing to endorse the candidate. And that's what Beyonce and Oprah Winfrey, plus many others did. They endorsed Kamala Harris and Biden. And remember, these people have massive influence in the Black American community. So they kind of sort of way, try to persuade the black people to go vote for Biden and Kamala, but it never went their way. According to the New York Post, right here, it says Trump demands Kamala Harris, Beyonce, and Oprah Winfrey to be prosecuted over the 2024 campaign payouts. And he says it was totally illegal. Okay. Oprah Winfrey and Al Sharpton, I beg your pardon, Al Sharpton fees that were paid to the stars during the 2024 election, right? So they were paid, of course, I can only imagine having someone like Beyonce. And I was just seeing an update actually this morning because I followed their site. They had that Destiny's Child reunion, Kelly and Michelle, and it again had Blue Ivy, who's the daughter to Beyonce. They've been doing this tour to tour. Remember 2 weeks ago we were trying to highlight when there was some of their music that went missing at a basement or a yard or something, and people were like, Beyonce has music and a basement. How can exactly manage to access Beyonce's unreleased music? That was bizarre and alarming. But anyways, who's Donald Trump? Me, I love Donald Trump. It's like, you know what, you guys, you thought you'd defeat me. Now I'll show you who I am. But there's a time, but currently Donald Trump is actually at the center of the Epstein files. So who is Jeffrey Epstein? Jeffrey Epstein was a billionaire who was besties, we can use the word besties, with President Donald Trump. He had this island somewhere, and if you are an elite personality, including, and these people, some of them that are still mentioned in the Jeffrey Epstein list, because that list is supposed to be published, and allegedly I heard the reason why that Jeffrey Epstein list is not being published is because President Donald Trump is on the list. And here's what makes it worse. Jeffrey Epstein was accused of racketeering, sex and drug trafficking, human trafficking, and even child trafficking. These are crimes against humanity. And these are things that President Donald Trump wouldn't want to be associated with. And so he will do everything. Even me too, I think I would do everything. But the gag is, these people were friends like 30 years ago. If you watch the documentaries, you will see that, and now CNN is in the mix, Fox is in the news. Everything is trying to being exposed by even the New York Post, the Guardian, the New York Times mention all this international media, and especially those that are leftist and the rightist, so to say, or the Republican media and the Democrat media. But the thing is, all of these people are just powerful. All these forces are powerful. So each and every time where Donald Trump appears, is being asked, when is Jeffrey Epstein list going to be published? And I hear Didi is also on the list, Oprah Winfrey is also on the list, Beyonce is also on the list, Ellen DeGeneres is on the list, because what was happening in that island there, something that had to do with drugs and sex, yeah. That's why it's called racketeering. Something as well that P. Diddy was convicted of. But then when it comes to child sex trafficking, it's just, that one is, especially with their laws, they can't even blink twice. You are sentenced to life imprisonment, yeah. Anyways, speaking of sentencing to life imprisonment, now, have you ever heard of an app called OnlyFans? Here's what the founder is trying to do. So the founder, his real name is Leo Radvinsky. Could be a Russian or a Ukrainian, right? Radvinsky. Kind of sounds like Volodymyr Zelensky, right? The president of? Volodymyr Zelensky is the president of Ukraine. Okay. Now, Leo Radvinsky has a bare bones personal website that describes him as a company builder, an angel investor, and an aspiring helicopter pilot. His personal foundation website highlights his commitment to open source software and philanthropic giving to causes like the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Buried, however, in any mention of the main source of Radvinsky's wealth, the pornography-fueled subscription site OnlyFans that he built into an online sex powerhouse. But anyways, I wanted to find a suitable word because this is an update from a Financial Times. It says, the Northwestern University economics graduate, he has transformed online Okay. So let me just get to the last part. Through OnlyFans spokeswoman Radvinsky declined to comment on the article. The article basically talks about how OnlyFans has made him richer. And I can only imagine how many people you basically know in your circle that are on OnlyFans, apart from, the business that goes on there. I believe there's people who use OnlyFans for the right thing, like, post a dog there, let somebody subscribe and buy and get to see a photo of your dog, apart from those other, adult stuff here. So he's said to actually rise among the richest people in the world. I can't wait for him to receive a reaction from Elon Musk. Can only imagine how Elon Musk would respond to Mr. Leo Radvinsky, the owner and founder of OnlyFans, the app. Now, I wish, so the way this one is more, actually I think this story is Kenyan. The way we say tunataka tujue deni yetu ni ngapi, watupatie pesa, kama watupatie pay bill tulipe. This is what exactly the United States of the America, led by my best friend in my head, Donald Trump, is doing. Guess what they've done? They've issued an app called Venmo, and this is how it goes. It says the US can now have its citizens help to pay the public debt via Venmo. Why can't we have it right here in Kenya? Anyways, let's get to that. The United States Treasury just launched a new initiative allowing Americans to send money via Venmo and PayPal to help reduce the national debt. Yes, really. You can now personally contribute to the 34 trillion US dollar debt. Yondo deni ya America. So the online portal accepts donations as small as $1 to even issues, it even goes ahead to issue a tax deductible receipt for your generosity. It's being framed as a patriotic option for citizens to give back to the country. Okay, that's a good one. Well, on the other side, while critics call it performative and unserious, others see it as a creative move to raise awareness about fiscal responsibility, whether it makes a dent or not. Washington is now passing the digital tip jar. The stories is from the sources from the US Department of Treasury. Man, I think that was what people last year were all about. They were like, hey, mtuambie tu tuna pesa ngapi China, kama tunaweza walipa, tuweke pay bill tulipe deni yetu ishe, tusiseme tuko na deni ya nchi yote, kama tuna USA. But the US played a huge role in terms of the US aid or USAID, the Medicare funds and whatnot, and it being cut, it just left a lot of people devastated, frustrated, unemployed and whatnot, because I can only imagine the number of people who are employed at the US aid, right? I don't know if you'd agree with this one. This one is about babies. So Silicon Valley is trying to breed super babies. It is now a standard for pregnant women and couples undergoing vitro fertilization to test for rare genetic disorders stemming from a single gene mutation such as cystic fibrosis or chromosome abnormalities such as Down syndrome. So fertility startup Orchid Health screens embryos for thousands of potential future illnesses, letting prospective parents plan their families with far more information about their offspring than ever before. And I think that's good. Thanks to AI and technology, you're now able to plan. Like, for example, if you know that you're going to, so what this is going to aid is, if you know that you're carrying pregnancy and you know that when you give birth to the child or you carry pregnancy to term, the child could be autistic or has the Down syndrome, you have the option of either, terminating it or maybe finding medical treatment, because, we live in such a daring world where people do a lot to, avert disaster. But either way, I believe that's a good move to try and help. Now, Gen Zs, they've come for you. This is what the New York Post says. It says, Gen Zs are not fun anymore. They're boring. According to the New York Post article, it said, the generation are always fighting about something. Okay. But right now it feels like almost everyone is in agreement. Gen Z is so boring. in the eyes of millennials and Gen Xers, Gen Z is the generation that single-handedly killed live music, drinking culture, and socializing in general. How? Gen Zs, do you agree? Let me see some of the reactions at that. Yes, I think this one sounds more Kenyan because most of the reactions are American, I can see. Somebody said, how can you have fun when everything is problematic? Sounds Kenyan, right? They were never fun. That's a millennial or a typical Gen Xer. This other one is so long. Another one says, they killed comedy also. And then another one said, Gen Z will be making TikToks during the zombie apocalypse. What? When is the zombie apocalypse coming? But let me remind you, the world ends on 2nd of August. So I hope you repented. I gave you this info 2 weeks ago. According to, but then they clarified, by the way, just to inform you, because that is misinformation, just to clear the disinformation, is they clarified, they issued a public statement to Akasema, the person who was circulating the news reports that the ministry said the world is ending on 2nd of August at midnight is false information meant to taint the image of the ministry. So the world is not ending on 2nd of August, just in case it does, I will tell you, okay? Another reaction from this, it says, I think Gen Z is spending all their time on TikTok and they would be much better off if they touched grass just a little more. Why do I agree in capital letters? But I don't agree that Gen Zs are boring because, but then according to the New York Post, it says they killed live music and then drinking culture. And so how? I think Gen Zs are drinking a lot. There's even an article that was written right here in Kenya saying Gen Zs are having fun more. They prefer to even take breaks from work to go have fun other than stay at work till 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. So I don't know. Do you agree with the New York Post that Gen Zs are boring? I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think Gen Zs are boring. Now, this one as well is from the New York Post. It says, bread and pasta may be to blame for your depression and fatigue and could even cause schizophrenia. So it says, there's bad news for carboholics. A growing body of research suggests that eating bread, pasta, and other grain products may trigger or worsen a wide range of psychological symptoms, including depression, anxiety, and even schizophrenia. Have you ever met somebody who has schizophrenia? I believe some of the signs and symptoms are closely related to psychosis or depression. But then there's a difference between stress and depression. But then interestingly, a lot of people do more of self-diagnosis. But remember, somebody said, self-diagnosis is always wrong diagnosis or misdiagnosis, because it's easy to say, I'm so depressed, oh my gosh, I'm so, this and that, oh my gosh, I can't. But then if you only sought the help of a psychiatrist, they'll tell you, oh, I think, Sakwa, you're stressed and it's not intense depression. Because remember, once you're taken to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, they are able to give you, I'd say, expertise help other than you self-diagnosing and even using the wrong drugs. But things like headache, you can go to the counter na uchukue pale drugs, useme, hey, you know what, yeah, nilikuwa naumwa kichwa na nikachukua madawa na ndo hizi niko sawa. And lastly, guys, do you remember this CEO who was caught on the, they called it the romance scam or the love scam or the kiss scam, according to the highlight from the Coldplay concert. So following the viral moment at a Coldplay concert featuring a fun calm moment gone wrong, fans flocked to the rock band's catalog. So in just 5 days before the show on July 16th, Coldplay's catalog received up to 28.7 million official US on-demand audio streams. And according to Luminate, in these 5 days following, the number surged by 25% to 35.7 million. Man, impressive. That's a good number. That's a good number. That's a good number. But again, the thing is, he was caught on camera cheating. Now he's lost his position. He's lost the family. But yesterday I was actually checking out an update. They now have a new representative. A new replacement is, let me just see, let me get to it. Yes, the new replacement is an actress by name Gwyneth Paltrow. she's very popular in the Hollywood circle. Just try to find out and let me know. Do you think Gwyneth Paltrow is a good replacement to astronomer? Andy, is it Andy Cabot? Yeah, please find out and let me know. I'd love to hear from you. And I think we can close it up on that one for some of the trending stories right here that caught my attention. I'm trying to get any Kenyan story that had a lot of headlines. Let me see. Yes, there's an interesting update from Sophia Nzao. She's made history as the first Kenyan artist to perform at Tomorrowland. She's sharing stage with Steve Aoki. Sophia Nzao has become the first Kenyan and East African artist to perform there, right, sharing the global stage. And I think that's a good move to have just, Kenyan music being exported to international platforms. And shout out to people like Bien, because his current song called All My Enemies Are Suffering, right? Are all your enemies suffering? You could be the enemy, right? And you could be the one suffering on behalf of your friends. So, yeah, ensure you're on the good side of, friendship, because you could be the enemy, right? And if you're suffering, it means there's no good that's going to come to you, my bruv. No good, no good. Speaking of no good, I have some good things coming up. In the next conversation, we'll be talking about youth representation, and I'll be engaging two youth leaders. And the question again is, how can we create a platform, or how can we create spaces that fully accept and welcome young people into leadership spaces, especially when it comes to matters politics? And now that we're seeing fires of revolution, not just in Kenya right here, but across the globe, young people are stamping their feet on the ground and saying, you know what, it's our time. Have you ever heard of that saying, you are the ones you're waiting for? Young people are the ones that they've been waiting for. So the future is now. And that is the conversation we are having. So we're going to do this.